Red Ink is a podcast by writers for writers. We cover trending topics from the writing community, share industry insights straight from the literary agency world, and share tips and tricks to hone your craft.
That's great, but you do know if you're pitching me that I'm already on board, right?
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Red Ink Writers Podcast. My name is Sandy Butchers. I'm the author and illustrator of the Singalarian Grimoire anthologies on Patreon, and I'm glad you made it back to us.
And my name is Lydia Stevens, author of the Hellfire series and the Ginger Davenport Escapades. Welcome back today as we dive into the art of pitching, from filtering out the bare essentials of your story to writing that dreaded 148 character pitch.
Red Ink is proud to be an official sponsor of Write Hive, the non-profit writing community providing free, inclusive events, programs, and resources for writers of all backgrounds. Did you know that they too have a podcast? Check out the Word Nerd Cafe at anchor.fm/WordNerdCafe podcast or click the link below in the description. This week, Lydia and I will take you through the process of breaking down your work into the bare building blocks of the narration. We'll slim it down even further than a synopsis, and we'll go even beyond that at the length of a Twitter pitch. But before we dive into the meat of today's video, we'd like you to take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button down below. About 25% of all you people watching us aren't currently subscribed, and although we appreciate your viewership, if you would really like to support the Red Ink Writers Podcast and make sure we keep the content coming, be sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Alright, here we go. The art of pitching is something most writers often refuse to accept as part of the creative process. Not only will it help you pinpoint what your work is actually about, it will also open doors when it comes to the world of marketing and even finding an agent for your manuscript. There are many ways to pitch your work, and during the past couple of years, Twitter has conquered a huge position on that market. In fact, nowadays, agents often require you to provide them with a tweet-length pitch as part of the querying process. Lydia, you have worked as a literary agency intern and as an acquisitions editor. Could you tell us a little bit more about the importance of getting noticed with your pitch in a market where the competition is as high as it is, in the writing industry?
I think the most important thing is that you're always pitching your book, whether it be to your friends, your family, somebody asks you about your book. And so you're always talking about what your book is about. And so it's really kind of nailing down those nitty-gritty details that are the most essential, most important to crafting that pitch. And so we see that all the time in a query letter, in at a conference, on social media. If you're promoting your book on Twitter, you have 148 characters to do so. So you're not just pitching to an agent or an editor, you're pitching to the entire world on your Twitter account. I think LinkedIn even has a character minimum on their posts. So it's figuring out the most important pieces of that story, of that plot, of that book that you want to say that will really hook your reader, or the person that you're pitching to. They say start every query letter with a hook. In general, unless the agent has specified to do something else, but you always want to hook that. That's your pitch. Is that first sentence, which really grabs the attention of somebody. So I think that's definitely being able to really know what your book is about. So when someone asks me what the Hellfire series is about, that's not going to get you.
No.
You're going to lose their attention.
Yep.
So really being able to say, we've got a demon hellcat who went to hell because she needs to atone for her sins and she's trying to get to heaven. That's my pitch. And then from there, if it captures the attention of the editor, agent, or whoever I'm pitching the book to, I can go into more detail of how she got there, why she wants to go to heaven, things like that. But that's the essential. That is the core of the story. That's what she's trying to do. That's her goal. And so, yeah. You've got, what do they call it? The elevator pitch, 30 seconds or less to hook somebody.
That's long, and it's like 30 seconds of pain.
Yeah. It really is. I remember I went to a conference one time and we were all practicing our pitches because they gave you 2 minutes with the agent to sit down, and then they cycle through to the next, because there was so many people pitching to these agents.
Yeah.
And so you really had to be able to describe what your book was about in that first hook, and then, elaborate, on what the goal is of the character, what the book is about, to what motivates them. She wants to go to heaven because, and all that. So it's really kind of pulling out these different methods for taking a look at your story and saying, I need this, I need what the main plot point is. I need who the character is. I need, what are they going to do? It's essentially like writing your query, only you're talking about it.
But how does that work when you're talking about it? Because, do you just dive in? Like you get the agent, and most of that stuff is being done online right now, I think, because of the whole COVID and basically the way the world changed around that. But how would I imagine this? She picks up the phone, you're online, you're looking at each other through the camera, and you go, when Raven is, conflicted with blah, 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 or do I just go, hey, how are you, and just crack a joke and then just roll into it? Because I could imagine that if just straight on pitching, it would just be like, I would be a machine just rolling out my pitch and go by. There has to be some sort of chemistry, right?
They are people too, agents and editors, and they do genuinely like when you say, hi, my name is, and how are you doing today? Because they're just as nervous as you are.
Really?
Some people don't like being on a computer screen or being on a meeting or something like that. So, but this is an essential part of their job, is they need to hear these pitches, they need to get this material, they need to find these stories that they're really passionate about. So they're just as nervous as you are of meeting strangers again and having to be there, on camera with someone. So definitely open up with, hi, how are you? Or my name is, it's nice to meet you, like you would at a job interview, because that's essentially what this is. Yeah. You're pitching your first self, your first project, your first, what you want to bring to their company. And that is your first point of contact. So you wouldn't come into a job interview, sit down and say, I have this work experience from the past 10 years without actually saying, hi, nice to meet you. Or...
I am probably going to sound a little bit estranged here, but this kind of opens up my eyes, because, of course, agents are humans, and they are, they would appreciate being seen as much as any other person. But in a way, when you query an agent, or when you pitch an agent, you would expect them to have done this a million times, and you just go there, all right, hit me with your pitch, blah, blah, blah. There's like this sort of judgment that you have based on like form rejections or form letters in general, that they don't care. While if you're face to face, exactly, that's when you get to see the person, and then all of a sudden it becomes so much more personal than it is than when you send a query letter. And this is just knowing that these people are just as nervous as us. It's kind of weird to think about that, but at the same time, I could totally imagine, because yes, you are number 350,000 of this 3-day campaign, and these people are. It could be so overwhelming now that I think of it.
I actually was speaking with an agent at a conference, and she said, typically I won't not request material at an in-person pitch. Because it is so hard to sit there and, so she might request like the first 5 to 10 pages or something like that, but she typically requests something from everyone because it's so nerve-wracking. And so from their perspective, to have to sit there and say, no, I don't want anything, they might try and, I've heard a couple who will come back with, that's just not really trending in the market right now. So I don't know that would be, but they don't ever want to put it back on the person who's pitching, because they don't want to make people feel bad. I think we get in our heads that agents are, these hardcore, just, they're not, they're people, and they have feelings, and they feel for you too. They understand how nerve-wracking it is to come in and sit down and put yourself out there. So they don't want, they also have a business to run, so this is their career, this is their job. So they have to keep that in mind as well if they're completely inundated with these queries and these pitches. But actually, that is where they get the majority of their authors. And yes, there's the whole query process, but when you're sitting face to face with somebody and they're pitching you their story, it's more memorable. So when they come back to that material that you emailed them, they're, oh, I remember this person, I really liked them, I got along with them great, or something like that. So typically they will try, if they're going to say no to an in-person pitch, they will try to let you down very easy. They're not going to be, and I think because we're so nervous when we do it, it's perceived that it's on us. But it's not. It's really, they're just trying to make the best, out of this situation where they are just not the right agent for you. And they know that. They know what they're looking for. They know what's going on in the market. So they, but they're not going to sit there and I haven't
say, no, this sucks.
I have never heard of that happening. So just, it's a communication, it's a working relationship. I say that a lot during this podcast, but it really is. It's about setting up that foundation to be able to come to this person and say, hey, I have this idea. Because once you have an agent, obviously your next goal is to continue with that agent. So say you publish a book or a trilogy or a series or something like that, they're going to want to know what you're working on next. So you're still going to have to pitch to your agent. Next project and the next project.
Although I could imagine that once you have that agent, the next pitch is by far not as nerve-wracking as the first one, because that's what the first time to get your agent, it's the all or nothing thing. You don't, the best scenario, you go home with an agent, figuratively speech. But in the worst case scenario, you end up with nothing, and you had nothing before, so okay, you're back to where you were. But once you have that agent, I mean, what you have to lose is the fact that you already have an agent. So I could imagine that the nerves aren't as bad then.
I can't speak to that. Right. I've been on the other side of seeing an author pitch something to an agent that was already their agent, and the agent, it just wasn't for them. So you have a couple of choices. You can come back to the agent with something else and pitch it, or you evaluate, is this agent, who is the best for me at this time? Is your working relationship, is that going to be mutually beneficial, where you have this idea you really want to run with, but it's just not for your agent, so you might need to find another agent. It's such a I think at that point you're correct that you've built this rapport with your agent, and so you can speak to them, you can have a dialogue and communicate. So it's not going to be, but there's still that little seed of, what if they don't like it? Everybody has that. So yeah, it's just remembering that your agent wants your next great big project if it's right for them, and likewise you want to be able to come to your agent and say, I've got this other really great idea, because it is a career, so you always have projects.
And also, and pitch wise, we now talk about pitching an agent face to face, but like I said in the introduction, Twitter has become a huge platform for pitches in the last couple of years. Like we have PitMad, we have a DV pitch, we have all kinds of different pitch events where agents just scroll through endless pitches with hashtags, connected to the event. But I think in a way they are the best practice an author can get to write their pitch, because you have such limited space to write down what the essence of your story is. I mean, we often talk about the goal, motivation, conflict method. I mean, I think that is one of the most efficient ways to, slim down the story until you have the essence. But man, 148 characters.
It's, and I have seen pitches where, it's acceptable now to use emojis. You can use sort of the internet slang, I guess. I have seen that in some pitches. The hashtags are a great thing because they kind of let, they indicate genre, they indicate, if it's diversity, like the hashtag on voices and stuff like that. So it lets an agent who, is looking for a sci-fi, you know, LGBTQ plus romance, you know, you have that 148 characters to talk about what that this book is a romance and what it's about, plot and such. And then you know, in your hashtags you can go hashtag romance, hashtag own voices, you know, to let because that agent might specifically state they are looking for the own voices authors. You know, and so that doesn't take up as much of your characters in that tweet. So then you can focus the rest of those on, you know, kind of conveying what the book is about. So I have seen them, and I have seen like the word "and" is, I've seen I do this a lot myself, because that's one of the best ways to get rid of to gain two characters is delete the word "and" just put in the actual symbol for "and." So, you know, there are different ways that you can craft that pitch in just 148 characters, and little tricks. The word "with," you know, W and a slash mark, and the next word all want, you know, because then it indicates that, you know, this person was with that, you know. So it's an art form almost.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a completely different ballgame than
so.
No, I agree. But you know, they also say that the Twitter pitch would basically be the hook that you could also use for a query letter. Where are you positioned in that argument? Because there are people who say yes, do it. There are people who say no, you know, get a different pitch for that opening of your query letter.
No, I think it's a really good starting point for sure. You know, because it's short, it's concise, it's telling you exactly what you want to know about the book and the plot if it's done well, and then you can transfer it to your query letter and maybe elaborate on it a little bit beyond the 148 characters. But essentially, you want that one sentence which says, you know, this is what my book is about. And with the query letter, I would get even a little bit more crafty and maybe revise it a little bit, in that you don't have to have your goal, motivation, and conflict all in that one sentence.
No, exactly.
You know, you can kind of tease them a little bit. It's a teaser. So you want to take your pitch from Twitter and turn it into a little bit of a teaser in your query letter. So I think one sample of my query letter is, you know, I have a druidess from Edinburgh, and she's got the responsibility of her mother, her sisters, and a fat cat named Chonkowski. Like, yeah, so that brings in a little bit of humor, and they're like, why does this woman have so much responsibility? And then I go into the body of the query letter of, you know, she has to do X, Y, Z, and to get this, you know. So it's a hook and a teaser. I think with the Twitter, I would say it's more of a hook, because you have to have goal, motivation, and conflict in that one sentence. With the query letter, revise it a little bit to be more of a teaser.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Red Ink has opened the doors to their virtual studio for fellow writers and members of the writing community. Do you want to have your book promoted on our show? Well, that is as of now possible. On our website, redinkwriters.com, we have a continuous raffle going on where you can enter to win that free promotion of your book. This week, we'd like to show you The SEPA Project by Gillian Moody, who is an amazing author who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of weeks back during the LGBTQ Indie Author Roundtable. Now, she totally blew me away with the complexity and depth of her story, which I actually have right here. There it is. And I'd figured I'd sell you all short if I didn't point you in the direction of this amazing book. In a world where memories can be stolen and the family is always listening, an unlikely group of rebels will struggle to let go of their power and stand against prejudice in a race to remember the truth. The SEPA Project introduces two peoples, the New Bhutanese and the Banjarians, who have lived side by side for centuries with only stories to imagine what the other might be like. One side, New Bhutan, is a beautiful society protected from the wasteland of the earth they call the Banjar. They control all the resources and consider themselves the last of humanity. The Banjarians live outside the barrier, creating a rich culture and a way of life in the world they were left with. After 300 years, the New Bhutanese are ready to see if the Banjar is healing from a previous apocalypse, and the SEPA Project is born. Sepas are modified as children, designed to enter the Banjar and record every detail of their memories. Every memory from the outside is emptied by the family for study, so Seppas never know where they have been, or what they have seen. When one Seppa doesn't quite fit her place, her mere existence sets off a series of events that will reveal the dark underbelly of their beloved society. The Seppa Project is book 1 of a trilogy. Now, I spoke to Gillian yesterday, and I had permission to announce that even this year, book 2 of this trilogy will actually be released. So get your hand on this amazing first part right now to make sure you're in time and ready for this second book coming right up.
Hey, welcome back. This is another segment of the Industry Insights, where I'm going to be sharing a little bit of knowledge that I gained through working at a literary agency and at a publishing house. So I want to talk to you today about how to pitch. So I know that we talked about, what needs to be in a pitch in terms of, your goal, motivation, and conflict. You've got that 30 seconds to convey to an agent or an editor what your book is about. But one of the things that we did not talk about is, your demeanor. Yes, this is like a job interview. I mentioned this earlier, and you need to come in and sit down, smile, take a breath. Because if you immediately just verbally rush into what you're trying to say, it's, you're going to take the agent or the editor off guard, and they're going to be wondering if they need to call paramedics. So take a breath, introduce yourself, really make a connection with the person that you're speaking to. So, you want to try to remain confident. You want to sit up. You want to look at them. You don't want to be fidgeting. Don't be looking at your phone. You just want to have a dialogue with the person that's in front of you. So people forget, because they get so nervous. It's like public speaking, and you get up there to the podium with your papers, and all of a sudden you're just reading. And a lot of people do write their pitch down on a piece of paper so they can practice it. Put the slip of paper away. You know what your book is about. So don't sit there and just read from a little card or slip of paper, because that's going to tell an agent that you don't know what you're talking about. So you definitely want to just, eye contact, take a breath, calm down for a minute, okay? And another thing that you need to keep in mind is you're going to want comp titles, and we'll get into that a little bit more later in the episode. But a general definition of what that is books that are comparable to your own title. Okay, you're going to need to know your word count of your story. They're going to want to know that. They're going to want to know the genre. They may even ask things, given if there's enough time provided. They may ask what other types of projects you're working on, why you chose them as an agent to pitch to. So you definitely want to have read up on this agent before you pitch to them, or editor, and why you think you might be a good fit. They may ask you about your writing career, what you've written so far. Okay, this is where people get tripped up a lot. If you don't have a writing career, it's okay to say, I don't have any publications, I don't have a substantial writing career. Tell them why you would be the best person to make a scratch and sniff cookbook, which is an idea I had the other day, and I got so excited about it, and my friend sent me a link for one, so I'm super excited because I might order it. But why would I be the best person to make a scratch and sniff cookbook? Because I love just that aroma coming from the kitchen and flipping through the cookbook, and there's gravy and flour and stuff everywhere. And then you get to have that little childish moment where you're in your element and you're feeling homey, and you scratch and it smells like pot roast. Okay, so you definitely, be excited about your project, even if you don't have a lot of experience. And say that you don't. You definitely want to prove to them that this is a book that's worth their while to take a look at. So maybe explain to them, I put it through 6 rounds of revision. I had, a New York Times best-selling author beta read it for me, or I hired this editor and they did a complete copy line edit for me. Make sure the agent knows that you put the work into the book, even if you're a first-time writer, okay? So you put your time and experience and the reason that you're capable of writing this book, because, scratch and sniff. Who wouldn't be capable? Anyway, you really went full hard at the process of writing a manuscript and revising it and polishing it to make sure it is worth their time. So if you don't have a publishing list and you don't have a lot of experience as a writer, just make sure that you bring something to them in that regard, so that they can, say, you know what, I actually do really want to take a look. They're dedicated. You are dedicated to making this work the best that it can be. So remember, this is a conversation with another person, not a machine. So when, make sure you know who you're pitching to. This is super, super important. I've seen pitches where they just pitch to everybody in the room. And you can tell with the agent or the editor, and they're and I went to a pitch event one time, and they had lists on the wall behind them of what they were accepting. And this person was pitching a Western to a romance agent, and she was just sitting there, and the eyes were glazed over, and it was so obvious she was just completely checked out. So don't waste their time, don't waste your time. Really know who it is you're pitching. I mean, I saw this a lot with query letters too, where they would send all to a list of like 100 agents, or they would, and these agents might not even represent what it is that they're querying. So really make sure that you do your homework. Sometimes what they want can change from what's on their website to what they're specifically looking for at a pitch event. So pay attention to that. Make sure that you're well hydrated and that you've used the bathroom, so that you're not in the middle of the pitch and all of a sudden you're like, but I got, and make sure you're awake. You don't want to sit down with the agent and look like a complete zombie. And, we need to just kind of excuse the way I look for this podcast episode, because I haven't fully finished my coffee. So I'm pitching to you to say, this is how you pitch to an agent. Don't look like this today. But yeah, so, really make sure that you're alert and that you're ready to go in and promote your work. That is I think the most essential part of pitching to an agent. And just have fun. I mean, who doesn't want the challenge? It's like speed dating. I've heard pitching is a lot like speed dating. You're sitting there, you're trying to woo somebody to say, show me more. And I mean that in terms of manuscripts, don't get all weird on some people. Yeah, all right. Well. Yes. So just remember to have fun with it and really, do your research before you go into pitch.
This week's Twitter poll asked what subject you were most eager to hear about on this episode. And we gave you 3 options: how to write a good Twitter pitch, how to use the goal motivation conflict method, and how to pitch an agent face to face. Now, Twitter has spoken, and the most popular answer coming from the poll was how to write a good Twitter pitch. By the way, did you subscribe? Now's the time to do it. Did you do it? Alright, let's continue. I dare say that the biggest nightmare in writing a Twitter pitch is choosing what to say and what to leave out when you only have 148 characters to use. We all want to give comp titles, and we all want to talk about who our main character is and what they have gone through, what obstacles they still need to overcome. We want to mention who is trying to take over the world and why, and we maybe even want to mention that funny cat that keeps popping up throughout the narrative. But the point is, with only 148 characters, none of that is possible. So we need to slim down the skinniest summary of our story that we have, and even go beyond that until we have the very essence of our story. Now, funnily enough, what you usually have left then is something that is very similar to the goal, motivation, and the conflict, which I know is kind of cheating because that too was one of the options in the Twitter poll. But if you look more carefully and you look at the Twitter pitch and the goal, motivation, conflict method, these two are actually very closely related. Lydia, I'm pretty sure you can tell us a lot more about that.
So I think with a good Twitter pitch, you said it yourself, it's the goal, motivation, conflict. You definitely need to know who the main character is. So let's break down mine a little bit. So I've got the Druidess in Edinburgh. They don't necessarily need to know the Edinburgh part at this point. So say Faye, is a Druidess, comes up against a dark druid trying to take out the world. That's pretty much almost 148 characters. So that right there tells you a couple of things, and this is going to need to be refined. So It's telling you who it is and what her conflict is. Okay, so the thing with a Twitter pitch is in the way that it's worded. Faye, this druidess, meets a dark druid who's trying to take out the world. That is suggestive of what her goal is going to be. We can assume that your agent that is reading this pitch is intelligent, because they are. They can assume that this Fae person is going to try to stop the dark druid, right? She's going to try to stop him from taking out the world. I don't actually have to spell out or write out that Fae, a druidess, is going to try to stop a dark druid from taking out the world. We can assume that is, so it's really kind of paring down and letting your agent read between the lines of this pitch to say, you know what, I have this good druidess and I have this bad druid, and he's going to try to do some shady stuff. Let's see what happens, So that is where you can start to cut some of the filler information that you might have in a query. I would put that in a query for sure. But with a Twitter pitch, druidess, dark druid, taking out the world. So then we get to what's motivating her. And we can start to play around with that a little bit, in that, I can say something along the lines of Faye, a druidess, turns to the archdruid for help to take out the dark druid who's trying to take out the world. So that's pretty much my pitch, my pitch, right? And that, bringing in that little secondary character, or that, little bit of information that will make the agent wonder, okay, what is it about this guy, the archdruid? There's something there that is motivating Faye to go after this guy who's trying to take over the world. So it's really it's getting your goal, your motivation, and your conflict into that 148 characters in a suggestive way, in a way that, the agent can read between the lines. And that in itself is the teaser. That's I want to know more. Like, why does she, and that's when they're going to hit you with, send me more. I want to send me your query. So that's when you can really get into the, kind of describing the goal, motivation, conflict. This is a teaser. This is a hook. Yeah.
But are there any other ways to do that? Because, like I said before, we often talk about the GMC because it is a very effective way to get things done. But I think one of the, well, not necessarily problems, but one of the things you're going to run into at some point is that everybody is going to use the same format. And I mean, you want to stand out with a pitch. You want an agent to look at your pitch and go, hey, I have not seen that before. Or at least not in that kind of way. Like, are there any other ways to bring in that GMC without having it becoming the list of the GMC? You know what I mean?
I think if you tried to switch it up a little bit, if you brought the conflict in, the world is ending, and then an agent's gonna go, why? And then all of a sudden, you've got that little bit right there, the world is ending, and then you can go into a dark druid is going after the matriarch druidess. Switch it up a little bit. We talk about goal, motivation, conflict, like we have to write the pitch that way. What the goal is, what the motivation is, what the conflict is. Switch it, or go CMG, go CGM. So
and what about? Sorry, go ahead.
How you write the pitch. It needs to make sense, but if you put the stakes right there at the beginning of the pitch, and then you explain why those are the stakes, that's your stakes are your hook. And then you've got your explanation for why you're hooking them into them.
Yeah. And what about pitching in the form of a question? So, for example, for the Singularity and Grimoire Anthology, I've been using, in a world torn between extinction or becoming monsters, whose side are you on? So yes. That is a very short pitch that I've been using on my promo materials, like from day one.
Yep.
But there are a lot of people saying, don't ever pitch in the form of a question. What's your opinion on that?
I've seen them both. I have seen pitches in the form of a question. It's asking the agent to find out the answer to the question. So yeah, I've seen both. It really is a preference. An agent doesn't necessarily specify that they don't want a question, so you're never gonna know that. But if it's a way to kind of stand out, You could get an agent to read that question, then I want to know more. I want to know what the answer is. I want to read this book to find out why this, Singularity is doing the things that he's doing. So yes, I think we get so hung up on, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, but where I've seen both methods, both have been acceptable at some point. So go for it. I mean, if one method isn't working for you, try the other.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many pitch fests out there anyway, so there's plenty of opportunity to practice. Like if one pitch doesn't get any attention during one of those events, it could mean a couple of things. It could basically mean that your platform isn't big enough to actually take off on Twitter, for example, because that also is one of the issues. It could also be that agents are looking at your pitch and just think, I feel like I've seen this before like a million times, because that also kind of happens. And it also just gives you the space to get your next pitch out there in a completely different format. So it's also a way to reflect upon your own work, I think.
Yeah. Same with the query letter. So I would say, you're pitching in long form in a query letter. If your query letter isn't working, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're not going to say, every agent hates me, my book is terrible. No, you're going to say, I think I need to revise my query letter. That's why I love Query Shark. I think I've mentioned it before, and they go on there and they revise these query letters for people, because it just, it is just so, it's painful to read some of these. So
but the problem with a query letter is that once you send it out, you pretty much wasted your only shot you have. And then Twitter pitches, you can do it again next time, and you can because
Pitch Wars lets you have up to, what is it,
4 or 3 and a reserve or something like that.
Yeah, so what I have done in the past is I've done the GMC method. I've done sort of that introverted way of setting up the stakes first and then answering why those are the stakes, and then I've done a question one. So have all 3. Revise your pitch so that you've got all 3, because you never know what someone is going to look at and really say, you don't know, because we can't know which method they prefer. So if they see one and they're like, and then later on in the day during Pitch Wars they see the other way that it's
but you're talking about PitMad, right? Because Pitch Wars is like where you actually have to query the editors. And Pitch Wars PitMad is the one with the Twitter pitches. Yeah.
So I would say have all 3 ready to go for PitMad. As far as pitching in person, that is, I wouldn't say it would be advisable to sit there and ask the agent a question. I would say definitely kind of work with the goal, motivation, conflict, because that makes it very awkward. If you're like, Singularity and out to save the world, whatever, what do you think is the beast? The agent's going to be sitting there and looking at you like, I don't know how to answer this question. So definitely, but I have seen live pitches where someone comes up and they sit down and, hey, are you interested in a story about because then that kind of puts the conversation back on the agent. But if you're asking them a specific question, and
most of them are rhetoric questions anyway. They're like, there is no answer. I could see how in real life that would be super awkward, because you would just have like a flatline silence, like nothing.
If you start with your your genre, what your book is about in general, your plot, and, hey, would you be interested in this kind of a story? That's fine. But to say specifically, what do you think Sovereign's going to do with, X, Y, Z, and they're going to go, huh?
I don't know.
So,
that would be weird.
But Twitter pitching, I would definitely mix it up, revise, and pin your pitches to the top of your profile. I don't think we've talked about that.
Good point.
Because you never know who's looking at your profile. So like as I've been building my platform and stuff like that, I have my current release pinned to the top. But if it's been a while and you want to change it up or whatever, you don't know if agents are on there scrolling.
Even to get it out there, like to get the retweets, it's often sort of mandatory to have it pinned to your profile, because people are not going to scroll through your timelines to find the pitch that you want them to retweet. So I think in general that's a very good tip. pin it,
Yeah.
because that's how you get people to share it. And you know how Twitter works. The more it gets shared, the more it gets seen. So, you will be increasing the chances of that agent actually seeing that stuff passing their timeline. So that's a good one.
Another thing that you can consider is look at the agent's profile. A lot of people have a little 148 character bio, and you might see something up there like hashtag own voices, hashtag LGBTQIA+, something like that. If you have room for a hashtag after your pitch, and that is the type of book that you're pitching to an agent, put the hashtags that they're using into your pitch, because they may be doing a search for those as well. Really utilize your search bar on Twitter when you're pitching. It can be a great way to kind of filter out or filter down, specifically who or what you're looking for. So pay attention to their profiles as well.
Exactly. And this might sound a little bit tedious, but what I did at the very beginning when I was still new to all the Pitch Fest is just find the hashtags that you are working with. So for example, Bitmat, for example, YA, fantasy, romance, something like that. And you put that in your search bar with all the hashtags. You get all the pitches that are using those hashtags in there. And if you see pitches that get likes, always click on who liked them. So if you see agents, if you see a pattern in what pitches they are liking, you can attune your pitch to that to make sure you get it right. So Pitch Fests are a lot more than just throwing it out there and waiting for the magic to happen. You can actively, well, not necessarily manipulate, but you can steer towards how you get it out there and how it gets seen in a way.
Another thing is interact with each other. The hashtag writing community is a great community in that we're always retweeting everybody's post, each other's post, and we're doing the writers list and things like that. During a pitch fest, retweet other people's pitches, because that draws them to yours, and they'll retweet for you. And so the more yours is getting retweeted, the more visibility it's getting. So definitely be interacting with your fellow writers. I mean, we're all in this together, so really support and bump each other, because that will help increase your visibility as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Well, that's it again for today. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we do invite you to pitch your work down below in the comments section. We are very curious to see what you've got in store for us. We hope to see you again on the next episode, where we will discuss lovely villains. And until that time, please remember, you've got this, even if you don't know what the fuck you're doing.